I'm glad to see so many of you here already, interested, active, excited. The Sunday after Easter, that's awesome. I have been, one of the great delights when I first became your pastor, my very first Easter, is I have a wonderful crabapple tree outside my office. You've probably seen it. And I enjoy it from inside my office. And the first year I was here, a robin built a nest in it. And I got to watch that robin raise babies in that nest. And the next year, the robin came back and built the nest. And I think it came back twice. I don't know if they actually do this, but there were two sets of eggs that year. And I was so excited the third year, and the robin didn't come. And it didn't come my fourth year. But sisters and brothers, the robins are back. They built their nest a little bit less convenient for me to watch them, but it's there. And it was a reminder to me this week of how wonderful it is to build something, right? And to see something new get built, and to see the new life that comes because of it. The robins are just a little microcosm of that vision. We're looking at the bigger vision today. Of course, we are all inheritors of that vision, right? Right. How many of you were here 30 years ago when this part of the building went up? Good number, but not everybody. How many of you were here when the sanctuary went up? Chuck. Yeah.
All right.
Ralph.
Sorry.
And Ralph.
Sorry,
And Ralph. Just a couple.
I didn't know what that sanctuary is.
Just a couple of us when the sanctuary went up. And of course, neither of you were here when the original building went up, right?
Yes, they were.
Oh, yes, they were? Yeah, you were babes in arms,
His
though, right?
parents were here.
Right. But you were very small. So we get to be inheritors of all of this work, all of this hope, all of this funding that has made our wonderful church possible and made room for all the new life into it. Here's my set who was not here when the addition went in. Here's the next generation coming to see what we might build. So let's pray and then let's get it started. Gracious God, we give you thanks for those who came before, who built and planned and prepared so new life might abound. Lord, be with Redeemer as we come closer and closer to renovating this space for your praise and your delight and for your people. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning. Thank you for joining us as we share with you the committee's vision and plan for renewing Redeemer. I did a quick calculation this morning. I needed a calculator to do it, but the committee has probably spent close to 1,000 hours since January of last year. And Tom Malkowski is going to take you through our process. Then Bill Sturm, our architect, will give you the details. Just one more passing going forward thought. Vicar Marcus's, soon to be a pastor, Vicar Marcus's concluding words in his sermon this morning were, God raises us to new life. So this is part of that raising and that new life. Tom?
Thank you and good morning.
Good morning.
So let's put this in the Academy Awards context. Tom is Jimmy Kimmel, and Bill is the entertainer. So my role is I'm the accountants who have to read the rules. Let's see if we can get this to work. I'll go quickly because you want to hear from Bill and ask some questions. This is our team, and we've reminded you before of the people who are engaged in. I'm glad Tom said it, that we did. I think we've met for well over 1,000 hours. And the other thing is that Jen has been so good at documenting everything. So we have a 3-ring binder that's now 3 inches thick of material that shows how we got to our deliberations and considerations and everything else. But I'll move on because you really want to hear Bill. So Pastor started out just reminding us that Redeemer is pretty close to 100 years old. That the sanctuary was built in the 1950s, 30 years later, we did renovations to create this side of the church. And when we talk about, we reference generational things. We're not talking about 70 or 80 years as a generation, we're talking about roughly 30, which coincides more with families. So for those who came in and had families in the 1980s here, those children are now grown, but they're having families too. And so that's how we're thinking in terms of the purpose of the church. We also said that this is not a rebuilding, so we're not going to create new walls and everything else. We're actually renovating stuff in here to create better utility and accessibility, and you'll understand when we get to that. And then the other thing is that we started out dreaming big. At first we said, well, how much can we afford? And that was the wrong question. We said, what should we do? Then we said at some point we'll have to come back and say, what can we fund and how can we do it, whether that creates a phased approach or all at once, but we don't know the answer yet. So the goal is to transform the facility now to serve the congregation and the community. So one of the pushes here is to better serve the community for the next generation. So to prepare for it now, not necessarily just for us, it's for those who are next. We said the priorities were, first, accessibility, and we mean both by being a welcoming church, and then also physically, how can we be more accessible? The second was related to all of our gathering spaces to enable and to encourage more fellowship. The third was the utility of our internal spaces, recognizing that most every place we have here already has multi-purpose use, or should have. There are many things related to safety and compliance, and just one mention there is, think of the security system and what we should be doing to update that, for example. And then finally, there are many general upgrades that are more maintenance related, so working with the property committee on some things that could fit into the plan as part of what their normal processes would be. We're trying to make sure we capture those things. And this is my last slide. It's real busy, but I want to say, when we started out, we used ELCA resources from somebody whose job is to do this only. This is all the guy does. This goes around to all the churches in the ELCA. We interviewed members of committees and staff early on. We went on tours of other churches that had gone through building projects and looked for ideas, advice, examples. How did they handle it? You know, what would they tell us? We looked at what the architects that we were interviewing had done. So we went to lots of their churches and looked at their renovations. We talked with the external groups who use the church, so PADS and others, but we said, what do you need? And then we evaluated the architects and their proposals, made a selection, and we introduced Bill to you last fall. So here are touch points that we had with the congregation in the fall, from interviews with users early on and stakeholder surveys, to the adult ed forums where you first were introduced to Bill Stern. We ended up with note cards and a suggestion box, and we got lots of feedback from people on that. Then we did staff interviews and user group interviews. And the thing I want to say here is it was Bill, but it was members of our committee who attended with Bill and listened and took notes and everything else. Look at all the groups. I mean, if you can read it, if you can't, mission outreach, particularly around PADS, confirmation and the parents, quilters, choirs, stay-at-home moms, Sunday school teachers, some individual families, nursery, property, worship and arts, and youth. And we have lots of pages of notes from that. Now, we're here with 2 weeks in a row of this adult education, and today is to share with you the designs and the scope of the project and get feedback on that. And then we'll end up with a congregation, we'll be at the congregational meeting for kind of a final review of the project then. So with that, I turn over to Bill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Every time I heard you really want to hear from Bill Stern, I wanted to bring my kids here. You know, in truthfulness, even when Pastor said it in church, it is a bit humbling because in many ways, the architect is just the scribe. They're the person that should listen and develop the ideas of the client. And so I think that to say this is a very much a community effort here. So what I'd like to do is jump through where you all were and then recommendations of where we might go. So if you recall, we kind of started with, what are we going to consider for the next 30 years? And I'm going to skim through the next slides, but to remind you that that 3-inch binder has a lot of content that we can go back to for years to come, not just any initial effort. So if you recall, we started with the exterior of the facility. We looked at, for example, the west side as a new plaza for welcoming. We considered outdoor classrooms. We considered,
Oh, we're working on getting the sound system working for hearing better back here.
we looked at the idea of columbarium, and actually that has had some renewed interest. So keep that in the back of your minds. There's some very strong support for that that's not tied into some of the initial recommendations. We looked at, for example, on the east side, which I relate to, most people relate to the entry of the church, and I've always not thought that way, is it being more of a gathering, community space as well, social space, maybe liturgical space for funerals, and even recreation. And then we went indoors and we started thinking, how are we going to invite all people, welcome, make it accessible, and have great amenity, and offer some services like technology or just coffee in a proper manner. The cold hard facts of dealing with things, services like restrooms, making those accessible. How we get, this was something that came up, how we get from one position, your car, in a beautiful way to the ultimate position, the liturgical space, which is a long route currently, and how do we make that wonderful? Ideas of maybe the narthex becoming a little bit more of a meeting space or a gathering space, maybe even with a chapel. And then we looked at considerations of someday upgrading the liturgical space, went downstairs, spoke to youth, music, knew that we had to deal with the classrooms in terms of pads, Sunday school, school on weekdays. And then we have the notions of, again, services, restrooms, corridors, and finally ending up in the fellowship hall. How are we going to upgrade that, make it, again, a very multi-usable space? So I'd be glad to go back those, but I think today is, we've already discussed a lot of that, and we can tie into this. But today is kind of the committee's recommendations to you. And what happens now is we've looked into some degree of detail, but there's a great deal of detail that has to be explored. But we need your reaction to understand if we're on course. And we're trying to add a little specifics so you can understand at least the initial recommendations. So let's start with the west entry. That's out to my right. This is the street, First Avenue here. I've forgotten about our notion is to, from the porte cochere or the canopy, to expand the initial ideas of a plaza by opening a walkway that is broad, add benches, or open it to drop off here, at the front entry of Blake, reduce the hedges so that we do somewhat screen cars, but open up view and welcoming to people in the community. So this is the beginnings, and these are images that give you feelings we'd like to start in terms of a community plaza that welcomes people to your church. And that has an elevation to it as well, potentially. We'd like to consider in the canopy, which is here, and it's hard to show, it's been more discussed, uplighting. And actually, if you walk out currently your front door, the doors swing out, and then you have about 9 feet before you hit asphalt. Okay? We'd like to advance an all-glass vestibule a little bit further, about 3 feet further, open up that vestibule, make it very glazed, welcoming, and give you a little bit more space there as people walk in. It's only like walking into a corridor currently at that level. So this would have the feeling of uplighting that canopy and a destination that's a little bit more broad, a little bit more welcoming. Then on the side, there's been some discussion of how do we make a bold statement to the community. Identify Redeemer. And so I only bring up this, if you look at your logo, for example, this is one idea. It's here. You have a copper tower. The notion is possibility of floating copper panels to represent your logo, backlight them, and potentially at night frontlight them. So that you have your religious symbol, your identity, a little bit more broadcast to the community. Then I'm going to walk you through the West Lounge offices and restroom. If I can identify, this is that entry, which has got the major stairs here, the elevator. Does everybody kind of really? Okay. So there's really not a lot that's going on, certainly other than renovation, interior renovation to the office area. But what we'd like to do is take, for example, the glazed wall that's so wonderful, and maybe even expand it a little bit with glazing or some design to start drawing people to the liturgical space. From an outsider's viewpoint, I'll admit, when you walk into the facility, you walk into a rather institutional feeling. It feels a little bit like you're walking to a school or something to that nature because you're in a corridor. And it would be nice to open that up and direct people to this wonderful light of the corridor you have. And as we mentioned, maybe there's something at the end that draws you there. There's ideas of water walls, where we would have that soft sound and the movement of water. Art is another idea. Plants is another idea. Maybe a combination of all three. So it's something to be developed. As you walk in, though, the first thing would be drastically different is the whole north side of your facility would be opened up. Those walls would be generally gone. Now, where we show dashed lines, you see these? Those refer to not the traditional notion of a movable wall, but the newer notion that you'll see in wonderful homes in Hawaii where you have glass accordion doors or something to that nature that lock and can create a sound barrier, but offer some transparency. And thus, let's take this room, for example. Right around the corner to the entry to the attic, there would be a door, and that would be your new library. This is just an indication of shelving that you have. That open area would be, or that area would remain mostly open, except if it needed to become a meeting room, and then that accordion of glass doors or something like that would close it up. I might add, too, for the youth that are patient enough to listen to me, we're looking at this now as not your living room anymore. This is the family room. This is the living room. That's the family room. We're going to have a coffee area. We're going to have counter space that we can offer cookies, stuff like that to anybody that walks in the door with a sink. And that whole broad area will be welcoming and open. When you go to your university someday, you're going to be walking into a library that looks quite different from what I walked into. It's mostly a place of group learning, gathering, exchanging ideas. That's what we hope this to be. And it now is not just amongst one generation, hopefully, but multi-generations. So this will become the broad room. So imagine, for example, today, after service, you walk, this whole area to the north is open. So those who need to leave can continue on down and out. But they're no longer an eddy trying to get around coffee and that type of thing. That's all got a very broad space. A space that is every bit as equal to the size of this room. And it has a permanent counter with sinks and storage and that type of thing to support whoever and whatever needs to be done. And lastly, it can be closed off. This corridor door can close that way, and that can close that way, and you have two meeting areas. Okay? As we continue down, the storage largely stays the way it is, except for a little space we took out for the counter. Then where the banner storage, and wait, banner people, I've got a solution. Is that we would locate a family restroom. That would require a little bit of repositioning for the nursery, their sink and counter space, not to be lost any space. And then the location of now new, two accessible water fountains. Anytime we start disrupting plumbing, the city is going to require us to meet current code. Current code is no longer one water fountain, it's a dual. One up, one down. That's where you see it always in airports or everywhere you go, schools nowadays. So that would be two. Then, around the side of the water wall, we have the men located. This is a current existing nursery, restroom. We'd like not to disrupt that. Once we disrupt that, it has to start getting bigger because you're grandfathered in right now on that. And thus, we are locating a handicapped water closet, restroom, toilet area for the men, and a handicapped restroom area for the women. So it's largely just tagging it on, taking a little bit of the counter space and moving that down. Okay? And that whole space would be renovated, but largely remain the same size it is, except for the additional handicap toilet. Then as we come back to the office, down in the corner, our interest is to locate a banner storage very intimate to the liturgical space, possibly with a rack system. I walked in there, and I'll be on, I'm the guy you can throw tomatoes at, but I looked at banners at the time I saw them. They were in a little bit this and that, and I'm thinking, gosh, just think about how we store clothes these days and dishes and whatever. There's got to be a way that we can make that something that racks in, racks out, and holds those banners appropriately. So, and would it be great to be able to just take those out, go and hang them up, and bring them back in? Okay. So that's that notion.
Go back, I just want to tell them about a couple of things here that I think are important and useful. So this accessible restroom, this family restroom, it isn't just for people with little kids. This is for a husband and wife, where the wife is in a wheelchair. Now they can both go into the restroom. He can help her, no problem. This is also a restroom that would be accessible for folks who are transgender. We had a transgender person in church last Sunday for Easter. How wonderful to have a bathroom that anyone can use right off the top. I'm excited about this concept of curving these walls. You probably have not, well, maybe you have. If you've ever ushered or been here early for a funeral or a concert, you might be standing somewhere around here, and you watch somebody come around this corner who's never been to our church before, and you see the panic in their eyes. They are already halfway into the church, and they have no idea where the sanctuary is. They kind of thought the doors were going to be right here. And in fact, those of you who are here the very first time I came to church, the very first midweek Advent service, I came to church, and I came in this door during a service. I was mortified. I was looking at the beautiful music. Little did I know that was what was going on, because I assumed this was a back door, not a front door. So this water wall and this curve is designed to help move people, to give them hope. There's something more to come on the way. It's interesting because we don't think about it. We have one major hallway. It doesn't seem like it should be very confusing, but it is to newcomers. And we don't want newcomers leaving with their very first experience with Redeemer bed. Gosh, I was afraid I would never get there. Maybe there's another church I can go to that's less scary, right?
Did Bill say where the robing closet is?
You know, we're needing to work that out. I pointed that out to Bill, that because the robing closet is currently in here, we would need to locate that somewhere. But I've been impressed with what Bill's been able to manage with moving things around. You'll also notice that in this early concept, I don't want anybody getting hung up on furniture, because it's furniture, but you can see he's thought of a little meeting waiting area. It seems like this is a room just for reception, but anybody who's here during the week knows there's always impromptu meetings going on in Cindy's office. Wouldn't it be great if there was actually a space for that? So that's some of the concepts here.
I think
Exactly.
the roving closet came up, and I did not have a solution to that, so I'm back to the drawing board. But I think what we see is just the closet area, so I just have to be a little bit more judicious. But one thing I would say, and this is again something that just to keep in mind, is in architecture, you would like to think your first solution is imagine building a white model. You don't have lighting, you don't have finishes, you don't have anything. You've just got the sculpted space. And you'd like to think that the space first leads you to where you want to go in this particular case. Then you start layering lighting, ceiling treatments, flooring treatments, colors, elements. You know, we have water, we have light that start leading you there as well. But it's like, how do I say this? Signs are great to tell people where to go, but wouldn't it be great if they knew where they're going without reading the sign? And so that's what the architecture wants to do. So we've got to develop that. And I think we've got to develop that both where you're going and when you're coming out.
Yeah, people get lost coming out.
And so they're deflected, or is there something wonderful at the end of that view? It's light, it's plants, it's people sitting, I don't know. Something that makes it wonderful. Okay.
John, do you have a question?
Yeah. So based off of this, so coffee hour would be right there where you put the counter, I presume, or would it be downstairs?
No, it'd be up in this area.
Okay. My one concern would be, isn't that also where adult ed would be, or would they move adult ed downstairs?
No, this is the parish room we're in. Adult ed would be here. That's not the parish room, honey. That's where.
Oh, it's just the first half of it.
This
No,
is,
no, no, that's
actually,
Aaron's
this
little
is your library.
Oh.
So it's all that area, yeah, gutted out.
So the parish room is really kind of where you're standing.
Oh, okay.
Yes, it's
Sorry,
not
sorry,
shown
I
here,
didn't-
but
That's the next
And
page.
you know, if you have questions or things you're thinking about, there are note cards. You can also write things down on the
He asked a great question, because I hear the hubbub here, and that means people didn't necessarily understand it. And so let's walk through here. See this kind of ghost at this point of walls and doors? This is the office that you, right to your left as you walk up the stairs. This is the library. There's a water fountain right here. Storage, banner, restrooms. I am now way out here in this room. So that's all open as you left.
Chopping off.
Great question.
Yeah, you had a lot of people's questions.
Great question.
And so you see,